Alrighty. I'm going to try this again. Please excuse me, this mic is really horrible. It's my daughter's skull candy setup. For convenience, I've downloaded these files to its own folder. I got a bunch of pictures of the Yakuska D4Y Judy. There was several models. There was a model with a radial engine, which was later. I don't know if they thought it was probably just better for a carrier variant than the liquid cooled one. That, oops, what are you doing in there, China? Delete. Okay. I'll show you a few of these pictures. Of course, this is a model. It's a little blurry. This used basically the same engine that the Seiran used, which was a copy from a German engine. This inline engine. Let's see, we got a picture. Here's a couple of shots of the radial engine on a real plane that they're restoring. Got a nine-cylinder engine. It's just kind of amazing. It was actually faster than the Japanese Zero. But and I got some pictures with some pretty decent markings. Some of the original squadrons and stuff. So there's a lot. In fact, it's pretty amazing how much the nose of this plane looks. It looks a lot like the nose on the Seiran. This is a model. There was also different variants with the canopy fronts, depending on the tube, the aiming tube for the dive bombing. It did have an internal bay. If they were carrying actually an 800 kilogram bomb, or like a 1,000, I think it was a 1,100 pound bomb, 1,100 pound bomb, they had to keep that partially open, or they actually removed the bomb bay doors because the bomb hung down a little underneath there. It could carry rockets, or they could use it to carry rockets, so they could also carry some smaller bombs on the wings. Here's another radial version. And quite a few of these were equipped with 30 caliber machine guns in the nose and 30 caliber machine gun in the rear. I think this is one of the pictures it's depicting. It's carrying the large bomb, and I'm not sure. Like I said, I think they actually removed the doors if they were carrying a big enough bomb. Here's a model, picture of a model that's, again, it's got the 30 cals in the nose, so it's got the radial engine. And here's now this, I'm not sure. I actually think this is some kind of a mock-up because it has this landing gear, but I think they got some tires and stuff, but this whole thing just looks like it's made out of paper mache or cardboard or like that. And you can actually see up in the wheel well. There's no way that wheel would go up into that wheel well. They have a big board there, so I think this is just a wood / cardboard mock-up kind of a thing. You don't see any like deuce fasteners and stuff either. You kind of do, but I think it's just. I think this is more of a mock-up, or if it's a real plane, it had been very damaged, and they have wood parts in there holding this thing together for just for display. There's an actual picture of a takeoff. Pretty grainy, but they're actual pictures. And again, this is a model. I think this is a paper model. I'm actually impressed on some of the paper models I've seen. They don't look to be too bad. I've built plastic models all my life, and I prefer This is probably the diagram I'm going to use for modeling this plane or playing with this plane. Here's one with a regular windscreen. It doesn't have the bomb aiming tube. These planes were actually built there. There's a good picture of one with a bomb underneath it. This is a real plane. And like I said, I'm not sure. I don't think those doors were built to fold up into the aircraft. Gives you a little bit better view of the landing gear bay. And I actually think on these struts, because these tires are pinned to this outside cowling's actually pinned to the center of the tire axle. So I think there has to be a part here where it slides. It's actually two separate pieces, and one slides underneath the other one. So as the plane lifts off the ground and the weight of the plane is off of the wheel, this hydraulic strut would push down a little bit. It would extend that just a bit, and then that would actually be the length of the landing gear as it folds up into this, and as the tire actually hits these big wire bars here and closes in, it would shut this flap over the top of the so it would be kind of like sealed up. That's usually, and this is actually a German article, which is kind of interesting. But anyways, I'm addressing this to my friend that's actually following my my Glen float plane blender tutorials, and he was wanting to model the Seiran, and I told him that I actually modeled the Seiran, but I think he's just wanting to learn how to model this, which is kind of cool. This variant here, believe it or not, it has the nose guns, and you had the pilot. I'm not sure if they had a guy in here or not, but they had mounted a 20 millimeter cannon in here, similar to what the Germans are doing, and they would fly it up to shoot at B-29s, and they'd fly underneath them at an angle, but they didn't have radar because they actually were wanting to use them kind of also as night fighters, and they didn't have a lot of success with that. Here's a picture. Excuse me. Here's a picture of the 20 millimeter cannon. And I think the Allies are actually looking at this. It's pretty interesting. This is a captured planer after the war. But and then here's a nice side profile. It shows you a couple of variants. They also had, which I have some pictures of this somewhere. They have what I call a fat belly version of this, and here's one. They actually had a version of this where they had three like jet bottle assisted, and I don't know if that was for like catching the bombers. I don't think they used it for quick takeoff. I think they actually had these bottles installed so that when they got up to altitude, they could use it for a speed burst to catch bombers or something. And this picture also shows the like it could carry 2 extra fuel tanks. This isn't too bad of an illustration here. D4Y2. So I have quite a bit of material here that I can use for. I can actually use for. Here's a model showing the variant with the 20 millimeter cannon shooting at the B-29s here, and actual squadron marking. See, there's quite a bit of research for these. Here's a model, a 1/72nd scale model by AZ Models. I might actually order this. But looking at the Seiran, this has the same exact turbocharged inline engine that was. Here's some model, which these would come in handy for showing you when I'm 3D modeling the. If I was 3D modeling the fuselage here, this is a good indicator of the wings, where the wings and elevators horizontal stabilizers go. Some It's a model, of course, but still like a little close up of the cockpit. There's lots of cockpit shots of this plane, which is nice too because I couldn't find a lot of cockpit shots of the Seiran, which because if I want to actually model the whole plane for War Thunder, I'd like to do the cockpit, so the guys that like to fly through. I saved this one. It has this plane. This must be a pretty famous air show plane. It seems like that D3 Val and that Judy right there that with the radial, and it has an extra large spinner. And then it seems like there's a lot of pictures of that, so that must be a good air show. And here's a Raiden, which is kind of interesting because it was a bomber engine on a fighter. It looked really fat. I always thought it was smaller than a Zero, but I guess it's not. It's actually bigger than a Zero, but with the body being so fat on this thing, I imagine it felt like flying a living room. Here's one with one of the 30 caliber machine guns with the drum fed, and I guess they liked that gun because it put out a lot of rounds. It shot a large volume of rounds, which was good. Here's a good picture of the intake here, which is interesting to me. It looks like it has almost like a double intake, and then with the triple, and again the scoop that actually scooped the air into the turbocharger, because these were actually turbocharged and fuel injected. The Germans were really big on the fuel injection because it allowed them to put a pretty strong. Here's a good shot of the engine, and the Germans pretty much had come up with this. Like I said, the Japanese copied. Dang, that must be a real engine. It looks like it's got a hole in that exhaust manifold. So you notice it has the dual spark plugs per cylinder, and compared to like a V8 in an American car engine, the engine's inverted. The Germans had come up with that before World War II. Actually, most of their airplanes had, if they had a 16 or a 12 cylinder engine. Yeah, this is a 12 cylinder, big 12 cylinder, and you can see the turbocharger, and they got the starter and stuff on top, but unless it's a fuel injection unit, I think that's a starter. But anyway, the has two spark plugs per cylinder. This is V12, and it's inverted because that actually produced more torque. It would wear the engine out faster, but it did produce more torque, and that's why the Germans would build like the Me-109 was a small plane compared to even like a Spitfire was a little bit bigger. But the Me-109 was a pretty powerful plane for the beginning of the war because it was fuel injected with an inverted engine. And a lot of people weren't sure, but that's a close up of the turbo right there. And yeah, and it also, with the engine being inverted like that, and it isn't as apparent on this Japanese plane, but in the German planes, it gave more room for the barrels of the machine guns on top. They could be beside the engine because the engine was a lot thinner on top. And again, this is, like I said, this is the other side. It just seems like I don't know if that's aluminum or wood, but because that looks welded or steel, but it just looks like they're reinforcing these wings. Like, I don't know if that was a crashed plane that they were just putting back together, this side here, because these holes look like part of a real airplane, and then they got more. Just looks like they were reinforcing, like this is a display plane, because there's no way those tires would fit up in there. It's another, like, seeing these exhaust louvers here, they just seem like they're phony. They're just, like they got the real engine for the plane, but that's on there for looks. So I don't know where that is. I'd like to see that, because I'm not sure about that being. If it is a real plane, they really had to beat the metal. Looks like they beat the metal back out, or they had to like put patches on this thing just to get it you know, like I don't think it's airworthy. Now this one here, as you can see, this is again that air show plane, and I'm pretty sure it's a flyable plane, and you don't see any of those reinforcement pieces in the wheel well area of this. Oh no, this, what is good about this is to show the like the hinges for the for the wing bombs. So there's a lot of research parts. It's a good close up of a real cockpit, even though it's pretty pixelated when I get bigger, but it gives you a little shot of where the instruments go and to a point in the control, the joystick, the control stick. Oops, there's another one that is an Australian redback, which is real similar to a black widow, which doesn't have anything to do. I've had a few pictures. I moved these files in here. I must have accidentally grabbed a few pictures on the way. Here's a nice orange and black, which Japan, when they were prototyping their planes, they tended to use this orange scheme, and this is kind of the orange and black scheme. So lots and lots and lots of pictures. Here's a picture showing again, like I said, I think they has the large bomb in there, and it almost fits under there, but that's not quite. And in this picture, they're actually showing, of course, it's a drawing, but and it's a model for a model, but they're showing this plane they're showing both of these planes using those jet-assisted bottom pods, and they show them carrying this very large bomb. Now, the Judy was developed before the B7 or about the same time, but they use these in the middle between the B7 and the B7, which they have a version in War Thunder. This I got a crack up out of. This is a captured plane, and they very hastily painted on the American star for the recognition. Crack up how sloppy of a job that was. And then some of these, like this one here, no, that one has the 30 cals. It also has the jet-assisted bottles, and it has the bomb in there. Again, with like, seems like it's missing the doors. And here's a wrecked one. So I'm thinking that plane that we're looking at in the picture is this plane here, somewhat restored without the engine. And so if that's really the mess they took to make that plane, then that's a pretty good job then. And I got quite a few sheets of diagrams. Where this might come in handy here is one, if I can blow it up enough, it actually has kind of a it has a little molded machine gun that I believe is the 13 millimeter rear machine gun, because they used the 7.7s, and then they had switched over to the 13 millimeters, so they hit a little harder. And then also it shows a real good outline of the wheel well area. Now this is interesting. It looks, I think the way they have this made, I think they have these pieces made so that you can either have in fact, if you look at this, it looks like they have it made so that you can have the wheels down, or I think oh no, okay, now I know what this is. These are actually the internal wheel wells. These would be glued on the inside of the wings for the wheels to fit up in. I thought they were like the covers, but they're not. They're actually the wells. But sometimes you can get good information from this, and this actually has the variations for if you want to put on the radial nose with the radial engine, or if you want to put on the inline nose with the inline engine, which again is interesting because that basically means the plane up to the point of the engine mounting is the same. Pretty much same plane body, and even in the instructions they show you putting this all together. And then I think it comes to the point where it's basically choose your radial setup or your inline setup. A lot of information. Alabama. That I can't blow up enough, it gets too pixelated, but this actually shows the bomb, shows the wing bomb, and it also shows, there's one picture in here, the Judy had a device that was similar to, here's a good picture of the 13mm machine gun, and here's a good picture of the 30 caliber machine gun that was almost, it was almost a copy of the Browning, I think it was called an M3 Browning or an Browning had made the 50 cal, the M2, and the smaller 50 or 30 cal in the like the 30s, and a lot of the companies somewhat copied them or took the basic idea. There we go. This had a now again, this is a paper plane, I think, but it shows how it would had the device that swung the bomb down out away from the, if they were literally dive bombing, they would need this device to swing the bomb out, and so it would clear the body and the propeller of the plane, similar to a Dauntless. Where if they were level bombing, they would just either open the bay doors, or if it didn't have the bay doors on it, they could. They probably had a sight that was more from like a level bombing site, and they could drop it from a higher altitude. Like this one here, you can see that it doesn't have the canopy tube for dive bombing. It looks like it's rigged more for flying at a high altitude. Now, interestingly enough, this plane doesn't have forward armament. It doesn't have the forward 30 caliber machine guns because they probably the Japanese didn't put them on a lot of airplanes until later. The Kate didn't have any forward guns. And the kamikaze version of this, they did keep the guns in. Now this is what I call the fat belly. So it seems like they taper the back as compared to this one, unless it's just the way it looks without the or like this one. Now this one is actually, somebody had scanned this from 2 pages, and you can kind of tell the part of the plane is missing. A very small part of the plane is missing. You can tell by the cut here, and the there's a couple centimeters missing. Now what I like about this picture too is it shows the small wing bombs and stuff, and it does show quite a bit of the rivet line areas and stuff. So we get to the point where you wanted to texture the plane. Some of these show some of the main frame lines, but this seems to be the most detailed as far as the actual rivets on the skin of the plane, which would come in valuable. So anyways, I still want to work on my Sayran, which I was not doing a video tutorial on, but I have it mostly finished. But I actually needed to model this and this for the Sayran, which is this would probably help me with this Judy. This shows the tail hook, which is cool. See, and this doesn't have the tapered up belly, so. And you can see the window here. The guy in the back seat, he actually had like a hatch where you could open up, you could look down through that window. And the other thing of interest to this was wanting to help. Here's one. Like I said, this was probably scanned from 2 pages, and the person realizes that that this much of the plane's missing, so but he has it positioned to reflect such. Here's a more complete scan. There's a white line here, so I don't know again if this was a double page scan. Shouldn't be as far as that white line's up there, but or when they were manipulating it, then they may have inadvertently got that white line in there. I have done that on GIMP before sometimes. It's a very interesting aircraft. Here's the white line. It's like it was a 3-page filled out or something. Just awesome. So lots and lots of information. I kind of like this one. This is actually a picture of a model because I think some of these Judys had basically a single flap setup, and some of them, I'm kind of curious, some of them look like they possibly had, like the Sayran flap, which was a double flap design that actually had actuators that would make like a flap cut. So far I've seen on this, it seems like it's solid. It looks like they split it. It's just kind of a weird construction. So, and this is a 1/33rd scale. And I've also seen 1/75th scale from Japan. This is a model, of course, but again, it shows these jet-assisted takeoff models, and don't seem like they have a lot of rivet detail and stuff here. They do have the larger fastener details, but that's probably a 1/72nd scale. 1/72nd scale. Some model companies actually have a lot of the rivet detail, and some of them don't. Depends on the company. Monogram used to be pretty bad about not really putting the rivet detail on, and Revel had some pretty decent models, and they usually had some pretty decent rivet detail on their planes. And then of course, oh, here you go, here's Minecraft. So when we do this in 3D, we don't want it to look like this when we're done. This is actually a Judy, D4Y Judy in Minecraft that somebody came up with. It was kind of cute. One of the things I was commenting on my Sayran, we've already seen these pictures. We'll go out of here. One of the things that I had commented on the Sayran is that I think that they could have put a couple of 30 cals in the nose just for grins. So, pop in the blender right quick. Sayran. See, here's my Sayran, and a few of the things I need to address on this model is, again, the exhaust that's not on there, and the intake for the turbo, and I have it material textured, but I don't actually have it. Let's go control 1. I don't actually have it textured. So I need to work on texturing this. The double, you can kind of see the double flap there, but it seems like, especially with the colors, it blends in. I actually have that double flap design. I'm not sure. I need to work on this thing. The windows that look blue, they're actually textured with transparency. So if I can get to where I can put this in the CDK, they should come out as transparent on the Now this looks kind of funky. I don't know what happened to my shading. I might have to work some on my shading, because I have a lot of lines and stuff all of a sudden, and I didn't used to have those. So I'm gonna have to get in here and smooth it again, because I had it where it was already where this window was, this stuff was smooth. It wasn't lined. Something is corrupt. It's telling it like, no, don't. It's telling it that I want a bunch of little lines there, like the glass is made out of a bunch of flat sheets of glass, and that's not the way I actually had the lines and the surfaces smoothed out so that it would more or less simulated a curve. And of course they did have a land version of this plane. I also need to look into, because this plane had some points on here that was had some hard points that they used for grabbing, like so the catapult would launch it. So I need to do some things with this. I do have it to the point though that I could put it in the CDK just to play with it and start putting flight files on it and stuff like that. And I have a cockpit somewhat modeled for it, but I don't have it added to this, like to this model. So I would need to add it to the plane. And this canopy is real similar to the Judy canopy. I don't know. I don't think it's exact, but it looks real similar. So it was quite a complex shape for me to model. The propeller doesn't look the same. This actually, I kind of thought this was interesting. The Sayran propeller actually looks a lot like a German propeller. It looks like a lot like this propeller that they had on a Stuka dive bomber. And then I modeled it as such. Let's go, let's select. And I got the whole thing objected. I might need to unparent it or something. Let's go to edit mode right quick. You can see the lines in this. Let's go Z. I could probably make this propeller. Is it A? Yeah. I could possibly make this propeller with a lot less vertices. What am I on, faces? Yes, I'm on faces. Let's go to dots. I've noticed the propellers that they have in War Thunder. I've seen some of the models of the propellers they had in War Thunder, and it seems like, I don't know, this is kind of a complexly shaped prop though. And all the tutorials I was watching, all the tutorials I was watching was telling me to try to use like rectangles, especially in Blender, and not use polygons, not to use like triangles basically. And in War Thunder and some other Autodesk things I was watching, they almost everything they use is a polygon, you know. And I got to asking some of the YouTube video people that I was watching the tutorials why you would want to just why you would basically just want to have rectangles and not polygons, because like when you get up into the tail area here, I almost have to go to triangles. And they're even saying if you have to use triangles to basically make them into squares, like turn the triangles into squares. And as you can see, I have this, I call it mesh bleed. You have this mesh bleed when you end up doing that. Let's go back to object. You start having these kind of distortions and stuff. And of course, if it's small enough, it's not that noticeable and stuff. But I've even been in game where I've noticed things like that on the actual War Thunder models. Like you can see slight areas where the surface isn't, you know, like from a distance it looks rounded. But if you get really close, then you can start seeing the sharp edges and stuff, and it starts losing its circularness, because the more of a circle you need to make, the more vertices and dots, and you know, overall to a certain line you don't want a lot of vertices if you can avoid it. And some games don't mind it too much on an object, because you also use what's called line of distance, which is simulated like this far away. This plane would just have a lot, like a few dots, and then you get closer and it has more. You get way up close and it has a whole bunch. But I would love to put it in the animation, and then I'd probably be a lot more motivated to work on this project. Trouble with it. So anyway, thanks for watching, and